walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path,
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artisana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello everyone. Before we get into this episode with my guest, Stephanie Starr, I wanted to add in a quick intro to speak about chronic health symptoms. So I've moved through a lot of different chronic health issues throughout my life, and I've done a lot of things to support myself, many of which was just kind of like a hodgepodge of my own research and experimentation. And I did a lot of stuff that supported my health, things that I still utilize to this day that have worked for me. And I also did a lot of things that were actually quite detrimental to my health and made my chronic symptoms worse. And after I wrapped up this episode with Stephanie, she made the point, she was like, I think it's really important to talk about the value of getting in-depth consultation work done with someone who is trained and informed and educated if you're dealing with severe chronic symptoms, especially when it comes to the topic that we are going to be covering today, which is homeopathy. And you'll hear in the episode, I talk about my own process in working with Stephanie over the past couple months, which I highly recommend. And I'm really grateful that I reached out to her and to like a professional homeopath who knows what they're doing, because I heard about homeopathy and I was like, oh, I could totally DIY this. I've DIY'd a lot of stuff in the past for my chronic symptoms. And having her as a support and being able to trust all of her wisdom and training and experience with this modality has been incredibly valuable for my own continuous healing work. So that is just to say, if you're dealing with chronic symptoms, I totally understand the desire to figure it out yourself. I understand that it's kind of where we're at right now in the realm of people who want to leave the allopathic Western model of health and move into a more sovereign experience of their body and their healing. And also, we're not meant to heal in isolation. We're meant to reach out to people who are able to accompany us on the path, who have expertise and experience. And Stephanie's definitely one of those people. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode. If you're someone who's moving through chronic health symptoms, you can definitely reach out to her. She herself has moved through some very serious chronic illness that she's been able to heal and resolve with homeopathy. You'll hear more about it in the episode. She is a resource to you. I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Seed. I'm your host, and it is a really big joy and pleasure to welcome my guest to the show today, Stephanie Starr. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you and to be invited here. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's start with the first question that I always ask my guests, which is if your ancestors were here with us now, which of course they always are, how would they introduce you and what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
Since the first episode I listened to of your podcast, I've been pondering this question. And what I've come to is that they would say that I'm here to bring our lineage back to earth, back into our bodies, back to the dirt and being in relationship with the earth. Um, I have had a journey with being somewhat dissociated throughout my life, and that feels like a theme for my lineage. And so I feel like that is my purpose here is to bring us back to the earth in many multiple ways.
Mm, so beautiful. And it's funny, right before we pressed record, I said something about in our opening prayer to set like the space and the intention for this interview. I said something about like bring the lineage back to earth. And you were like, that's what I was gonna say. And I was like, same wavelength, baby. Yeah, I love that. And I also feel that so similarly myself of a lot of disembodiment and a lot of dissociation, which is hilarious because I was a dancer for my whole life. I still am, but like my whole life was the body. And yet I was still so disembodied for a long time. And so I think a lot of women and a lot of people in general can relate to that feeling of like, where am I? What is Earth? What am I doing here? This doesn't feel like home. This doesn't feel like real life. Like, that is a big challenge that I think a lot of people face. And I love that your orientation is like, no, no, no. My work for my lineage right now in this lifetime, like, we're getting back to basics, like the most honest and true alignment with what it is to be here on Earth. To offer listeners a little bit of context for how Stephanie and I know each other. So we first crossed paths back in November when we started the same practitioner level training with one of our teachers, Kidda Sachet from the Holy Well, who has been on the podcast before. And it was a practitioner level training that was all about preventing pregnancy with plants. And so that's where we first crossed paths. And you shared so many beautiful things in class, a lot about your own womb healing journey, which many women are in the process of doing. I'm still always kind of in the process of getting back into right relationship with my own body, my fertility, my reproductive health. And you shared so openly and so honestly and so vulnerably. And I was like, girl, me fucking too. I get it. I get it, you know? And then we've continued to be in similar containers within the Holy Well space and learning amongst one another. And then you reached out to me, maybe it was like over the summer, maybe in like May or June. You reached out and you were like, Claire, I am loving your podcast so much. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. And also, I have an idea for an episode that we could co-create together about homeopathy. And at the time, I was kind of like, I'm totally down. I don't know anything about homeopathy, which is hilarious because I'm in another training currently where homeopathy is a big section of the work. It's a birth work training with an amazing elder named Wapio. And when I first got into the training, I was like, homeopathy, like, what is that? Like some woo-woo bullshit, which is hilarious because I'm a very woo-woo chick. And I'm willing to try pretty much any healing modality a lot of the time just to kind of see what it's about. And so I was down. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we got on the phone and you were sharing about your homeopathy journey. And I was like, I would love to have you on the show. And you said, which I'm so grateful you did, you said, I would love to do some homeopathy work with you first so that you can see what it's like. And then afterwards, let's talk about doing an episode. And I was like, cool. And so then we've been working together, I guess, over the past 2 months, doing consultations, receiving my remedies, going through the whole process, and it has been profoundly transformative. And so I'm incredibly excited to be able to get on the phone with you today and share this whole experience and share with listeners just what the magic of this medicine is. I mean, it's truly profound for me. So that's just a little bit about what we're coming into the conversation with. I'd love to give you the opportunity now to share about your path, your work, what you orient to, anything you want to share with the listeners.
Sure, thank you. Um, so a little bit about my story and how I kind of landed here. Um, I I dealt with chronic illness starting when I was 15, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, and some really um, severe mental health issues. And I didn't know why. It just kind of all of a sudden started at that time in my life. And for the next 10 years, I wasn't able to work much. I had a super limited capacity for doing pretty much anything. Um, and I was just really struggling. I was in and out of college, and I did end up actually finishing my degree, which is amazing, in biology, because I had always been fascinated by the body and health, but I had never found the one thing that felt like that's for me. Like that's definitely gonna stick. I was in all kinds of majors and all kinds of things, and I never found the right fit. So in 2017, I found out that my mom's house, where I was living at the time, had a lot of mold. And we connected that back to the time that my health declined was right after we moved into that house. Um, and so I ended up moving out, but I was still feeling horrible every day. Like it was better, like it wasn't, a 10 out of 10 intensity, but I was still really sick. And this is when I dove straight into alternative and natural health. I had a lot of time on my hands because I was in bed for about 20 hours a day at the time, but my brain still worked. So I researched and learned and did everything that I could to figure out what I could do and how I could get better. Um, so now here I am 7 years later. Deep into homeopathy. I tried many, many natural modalities before that. But I always felt like there was like kind of a missing piece that it seemed like it was so much work. If it was so much efforting, like you had to change every single thing about your life to get any movement to feel any better. And then the second that you drop the ball on one thing, you were kind of back to where you started. And so I knew there had to be something else. And so I just kept digging and digging and digging. And I ended up finding a podcast on homeopathy. And I listened to three homeopaths talk, and I was like, this is what I need. And so I started seeing a homeopath, and within 2 appointments, I was researching, I was reading, I was doing all the things. And at that point, I knew that at some point I would study homeopathy. And then um, one of the accounts that I followed and really like her teaching style. She's a wonderful woman. And she just can say anything in a way that you can understand. She announced that she was starting a homeopathy school, and I was like, oh, I'm in. Okay. And so right now I have less than a year left at RMDY Academy and um, for homeopathy. And I am just so grateful to be doing this work. It has changed my life, and I could not have imagined a better fit for what I could spend my life devoted to.
Oh, amazing. And yeah, I feel like so many people who end up in any kind of healing modality are generally the people who have suffered a lot with their health. And I can say that as someone who pretty much my entire life, starting at a very young age, like was in and out of hospitals, was in and out of doctors' offices, always on some antibiotic or medication, really struggled so much with my reproductive health, with my reproductive organs, my menstrual cycle, so many sexual violations, like really, really going through the shit for, I don't know, 27 years at least of my life. And I went through the same kind of rabbit hole of alternative health, you know. There were many things that would support me and that I still do utilize. But then it felt like if I wasn't really diligent and like regimented and super disciplined, and almost kind of like policing my health all the time, like shit would just hit the fan. And then there's like this shame spiral that I would move into. And then I was like, well, how am I supposed to like show up in service to others if I can't even heal myself? You know, like all the drama, which now I orient very differently. Now when symptoms come up, I'm like, ooh, it's like another little study that I get to do on what it means to come back into alignment with my body. Like, thank you, God, for giving me this little illness right now. Like, this is great, you know? Which we'll talk about later in the episode, just shifting your relationship to health and your health paradigm. But I totally get that. And I am so happy that you found a modality that really brought you back into alignment, the one that really fit. And I do think that everyone finds their own path, everyone finds what works for them. But I can definitely say, as someone who's been working with you now for the past 2 months, I'm like shocked that homeopathy is so underrated. Like it's actually insane to me. And we can get into a little bit of like the history and like why that is and what happened there. But it is such a profound body of work to immerse yourself in. And I'm excited in the future to like get deeper into it in my own studies. But being able to just be the patient first and receive your care and receive also like the unshakable faith that you have in this medicine because you know how deeply it's impacted your own life. And so when you are able to be in the hands of someone who's like, I trust this, I trust you, I trust the healing, like, let's go for it, brought me so much peace and relief in my process. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm game. So, yeah, I'd love if you can just give listeners an overview of homeopathy, the history of it, whatever you want to share, whatever you think is going to be useful for people who are maybe hearing about this for the very first time and are like, well, what is that?
So, homeopathy is an entire system of medicine that's over 250 years old. And it is an energetic medicine. So, if you're not familiar with homeopathy, probably what you would be most familiar with that is similar is acupuncture. So, acupuncture uses needles to stimulate the energetic body, and that's what homeopathy does, but we use remedies that we take orally instead. So, remedies are made from literally anything you can think of: plants, animals, minerals, medications, literally anything that exists or even doesn't, because there are some um, remedies made from imponderables like Wi-Fi and sunlight and things like that. So literally anything can be made into a remedy, and we match up um, the energy of that remedy with the energy of a person. So when you have a whole slew of symptoms, they're all related. There's nothing that's separate. We look at people in their entirety, your mental symptoms, all of your physical symptoms, any sensations that you have, your dreams, literally anything points us towards certain remedies because each remedy has a whole picture of things that go with it, of mental symptoms, physical symptoms, fears, food cravings, whether you're warm or hot, all kinds of things. And that, so when we do a homeopathy case taking, I ask somebody for an hour and a half about everything about them. I want to know your personality. I want to know what things you like and dislike, what your symptoms are, all of those things, to be able to match a remedy to you exactly. Um, and so the mechanism of how homeopathy works is a little bit different than what most people are used to, even in other natural health modalities, which is like you take herbs, the herb does an action on your body, and then that's what the changes are from. Whereas homeopathy, because it's an energetic stimulus, it's just nudging your body to do the healing that it already knows how to do by itself. So, Kittis from the Holy Well, she has a really great example that she talks about that perfectly embodies this, is that when you get a cut on your hand, your body just heals it. It already knows how to do what it's supposed to do. And that should be the case for any other physical, mental symptoms that we have, but sometimes the energy gets stuck. And there's a variety of reasons, and I'll go into that in a minute. But when the energy gets stuck, then your body is unable to do what it already knows how. So we use a remedy to give it a little nudge, what we call the vital force, which is whether you want to say spirit, body, mind, however you want to put it. In homeopathy, it's called the vital force. But basically, you're just nudging the vital force with the remedy to be able to get back in action and do exactly what it knows how to do. And so that's why we want to match the energy of the remedy to the person, is because we're matching what kind of stimulus that your body needs. Um, and so the things that can make us stuck or have like energetic distortions in our field that are impacting our health. You can have traumas that you've had, whether that's physical or emotional, unprocessed emotions, can be from like medications or procedures. Or the thing that we're going to talk a lot about today is stuck energy in your family lineage.
Yeah, awesome. Super helpful, like brief slash also in-depth overview just of like how it works on that subtle energy level, but like the deepest energy level as well. And you feel that when you start taking remedies, you're like, whoa, things are definitely changing. And okay, this feels different. Things are feeling good. Whoa, okay. I just cleared something from like 4 generations back. Whoa, okay. But it is, I don't even, it's so quantum. Like it is like the tiniest little shifts that open a new door to a new reality. That's how I was feeling when I was going through my process with it. And then I was able to look back, see myself 2 months ago and be like, wow, things are really, really different. Like really, really different. Would you be able to share a little bit with people kind of about the history of homeopathy? And also, when I was first talking with you about this on the phone and kind of like the way in which homeopathy was actually very much a part of our Western medical system for a while. And then it like disappeared, but really got kind of buried. So can you give just a little bit of context for that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of background on the founder of homeopathy, Samuel Hahnemann. He was a medical doctor in Germany. And so he, throughout his career, he like basically discovered homeopathy and did all these evolutions as he practiced and figured things out. But so at the time, he was primarily training other medical doctors because he was a doctor and he was like, here's this new system of medicine that actually works to heal people and doesn't hurt them in the process. Because during the time that he was practicing, they were doing bloodletting. They were using mercury as a treatment for syphilis, which like it worked, but then you were mercury poisoned. And so there was all kinds of things. And he's like, hey, how about this other thing that actually like really heals people? So he was training all these doctors. There was homeopathic hospitals around the world, like entire like inpatient hospitals that used only homeopathy throughout the United States. I believe there was over 100 in the United States. Still to this day, there's homeopathic hospitals in India, and 80%, I think, of medical doctors in France use homeopathy. So it's still big in other parts of the world. But in the United States, a lot of people literally don't even know about it or know that we had these hospitals. Um, and so part of what happened is it was around the time when um, the Rockefellers were kind of in power and had a lot of money, and they were donating to and like giving money to hospitals and things like that. And they realized that, and this is part of it, there's other like inner workings of homeopathy where there was like kind of a lot of infighting at the time. And so that was like part of the downfall. But another big part of it was that Rockefeller, like he was actually a user of homeopathy. He had two personal homeopaths for his family, but he realized he could make a lot of money from pharmaceutical drugs, which are made from petroleum products, and that was his business. And so he basically gave huge amounts of money to that and somewhat like blackballed homeopaths a little bit. And so it was kind of pushed under the rug. And there was a time when doctors couldn't associate with homeopaths without being scared that they were going to lose their medical license. And just a lot of, the typical shady stuff we we know is in the history of a lot of things. So homeopathy was very big in the United States. It's like I said, it's still used in many other areas. Um, there's some countries that use it as like preventative for communicable diseases. It was really big. Like its biggest success came from being used in the Spanish flu epidemic, where the mortality rate of people who are treated with homeopathy was about 1%. And everybody else, we know that like huge amounts of people died during the Spanish flu epidemic. So that was kind of its claim to fame at first. And so people were like, hey, this really works. So that's a little bit about the history. It's like it was very popular and now it's been rising a lot again as people realize we need something powerful to be able to take our health back these days.
Yeah, amazing. And the funny thing is that I did not know that it was a German man who, um, what I personally feel when I tap into the field is like called that medicine back. Like, I don't think that he was necessarily discovering anything new. I think he was like, I think that our ancestors did something very similar to this, and like, I'm gonna evolve it. And when you told me that it was like a German man, I was like, whoa, that's hilarious because a huge part of my own ancestral healing has been for a very long time divorcing myself from my German heritage, my German bloodline. For so long, I was all about like my Celtic bloodline, and I was like, yeah, the Druids, like that's me. Like I'm at the Standing Stones. I went on many pilgrimages throughout the Celtic Isles. And I did spend a little bit of time in Germany when I was younger. I was considering moving to Berlin for a while, doing my whole like Berlin artist timeline that I wanted to do. But I really was like so detached from my German ancestry and I was really ashamed of my German ancestry and I like didn't want to belong to it. And then when I left the jungle back in November, the two healing modalities that came into my field, the ones that have been really the most profound for just where I'm at right now. One of them was first German New Medicine, Germanic healing knowledge, and I've learned under multiple different teachers in that modality, and that has been a huge shift in my health paradigm. And then homeopathy, when this came into my field a couple months ago. And you were like, oh, it's like from a German guy. And I was like, I guess my German ancestors do know something about healing. Like that's awesome, and bringing that back into my ancestry and re-belonging myself to that part of my bloodline has been deeply healing, which I feel like goes into the next part of what we want to talk about, which is all about miasms and lineage clearing and what homeopathy does in that respect. Because as you said earlier, and also like when we were in our whole process, you were like, yes, there are some remedies that are good for this, that, and the other thing. But the way that I personally work with it is that like, this is lineage work. This is deep ancestral work. So I'd love to hear you speak on all of that good stuff.
For sure. So, a big part of homeopathy is what we call miasms, which is basically energetic distortions that get passed down through families. So, Samuel Hahnemann, he brought this about through his chronic disease theory. So, he was treating people with homeopathic medicines for acute things, and they would just be relapsing. So, he was thinking, there's got to be something more. Like, what is underneath this? Why can I treat them now and they get a little bit better, and then it comes back? Um, and so he realized that there are these distortions that can get passed down. There are several miasms. It depends on who you ask how many there are, because kind of new ones can come up based on current events. Like these are the historical ones. There are three main miasms, and then there are a few combined ones. And then now there's speculation that there's like a strep miasm coming in because of how many people have suppressed strep throat over the past 50 years or so. So it's kind of depending on who you ask, there's a different number. But his three main miasms were Sora psychosis, not psychosis like a psychotic break, but it's a different root word. And then syphilis. So he found that the energetics passed down from somebody in someone's family that had syphilis led to certain types of disease later. And so Sora is from scabies, so from like a skin infection, and then psychosis is from gonorrhea. And so basically, I mean, there was in the time that he was around and even now, but there was, huge amounts of STIs going around. And so they would be treated. And even now, we treat with antibiotics, but that is suppressing the infection. And so then it can lead to a pass down kind of energetic distortion. And so when we look at the miasms, we can look at like syphilis is maybe like the one that's the clearest. So when somebody gets syphilis, there's certain symptoms that they get. They have like severe, like they pretty much go insane. So severe mental health issues. They have like ulcers and degenerating like parts of their body. So their bones or like their nose, the cartilage in their nose might kind of self-destruct or things like that. So the syphilitic miasm we see as like all of these destructive tendencies. And so then that can be looked at in people who have a syphilitic miasm coming down into their family as the propensity for alcohol and drug abuse, severe mental health problems, degenerative things like tooth decay, or if you've got osteoporosis, it can be a lot of like blood disorders and heart issues, just anything kind of in that like destructive like area. It can be like severe autoimmune diseases too, if your body is kind of like self-destructing in that way. So this has been, and I know it like when you say like, oh, it's syphilis that like freaks people out, but it's the energy that was passed down. This was a big one for me in my journey. My one side of my family has a very like syphilitic history, like lots of drug and alcohol abuse, huge amounts of mental health problems. Syphilitic miasm is also related a lot to ADHD, because there's a lot of trauma passed down there. And so that one has actually been huge for me in my own healing journey, especially in the coming back into my body part. So that's a little bit of an overview. If you want to go into the individual ones more, we can. But it's just the things that get passed down, they can lead us to propensities. So like when mainstream medical talks about genetic diseases, in homeopathy, that's the miasms for us. So, like, yes, it's passed down through people, but it's not set in stone in our genes. It's passed down as an energetic susceptibility, more akin to like epigenetics and what they're talking about today with being able to switch on and off genes. Um, and so recently, a lot of homeopaths have realized the miasms, we talk about them a lot in all of these negatives, but it's not all negative. It's like, oh, this bad thing that you have to get rid of. But there can be, if you're out of balance, it can be you're having more of the negative characteristics. But all of the miasms also have positive things that come with them. Like syphilis, for example, many of the people that are under the influence of the syphilitic miasm are extremely creative. And they're also very connected to like the spiritual elements, like the veil is thinner for them. And so they can be people who are, very like almost psychic or things like that. And so those things are all gifts, but we can also it can be tipped to the side where you're having more of the negative consequences. We learned the other day that there were actually artists and painters and musicians in the time when syphilis was pretty rampant, that would purposely get syphilis because they thought it would bring them a muse for their art. And so they would they would take on this horrible, horrible disease because it would bring them all of this creative clarity during the time before they went insane. And so it is important for us to think like, okay, these miasms, they're not death sentences. They're not like some like dark cloud over our heritage or our lineage, but they are something that we can use homeopathy to bring into a bit more balance.
Oh my gosh. It's so cool and it's so funny because I'm like, oh my God, I have so much like syphilitic propensity for sure. The first thing I was just thinking about is like how the kind of three main ones that were originally worked with were like with syphilis, gonorrhea, and then scabies. And I at least know from so much of my own deep healing work, specifically with all of the time that I spent living in the Colombian jungle. For people who are new to the podcast, I lived in the Colombian jungle in an indigenous village for a year and a half and was deep, deep, deep in my plant medicine studies, predominantly with the medicine of Yahe, which is the Colombian brew of ayahuasca. And so much of my process in the jungle was about clearing a lot of sexual distortion in my own lived experience, but like for seven full generations back in my bloodline. Like that was, I would say, like the core of my work. And when you were speaking to the chronic symptoms that come from the distortion of sexual energy, it makes so much sense because sexual energy is our life force energy. It's like our vital force. It is what is connecting us to God, creator, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it. It is the thing that is like birthing realities into the world. And so whenever there's a distortion with that, yeah, things are going to get out of whack. And you're going to deal with all of these different symptoms that might not show up in a sexual way for you. You yourself, like, won't test positive for syphilis, maybe, but all of the other things that you were speaking to, like the mental and emotional expressions of what that miasm is. I also love what you spoke to just about like, something I think about a lot is my ancestral curses, and I'm saying curses like in quotations, like my ancestral curses are also my greatest ancestral blessings, is exactly what you spoke to kind of more towards the end, like the artistry, the psychic nature, seeing beyond the veil, like being really tapped into the unseen realms. It feels very like eighth house medicine almost, which I walk with a lot of eighth house placements in my astrological chart. But it feels really true in that when I was younger and I hadn't done the work of clearing all of this stuff through various modalities, there was such a deep creative charge in me. I've always been an artist, but was making my art based on like so much pain, like so much drama, so much suffering. And like I just needed to suffer more and more and more to be able to create. And I created beautiful art in my younger years that was predicated on severe degrees of trauma and suffering. And as I cleared all of that and cleared it and cleared it and really came back into right alignment, predominantly with like healthy sexual expressions, my art deeply transformed into like very life-giving and very vibrant and totally just connected to nature. And like I was just drawing flowers all the time and like pregnant women and families and like the land coming back to life because that's what I felt like was happening in my body. And so I love the way that you kind of interwove all of that with like this is what we're looking at from a homeopathy lens. This is what we're looking at from an epigenetic lens. This is what we're looking at when we're talking about ancestral curses and blessings and everything that comes forth, and not what is the word, pathologizing any of this, like not looking at it and being like, this is a problem that must be fixed versus like, this is a pattern that gets to be worked with. This is a shadow that gets to be brought to light. This is, an opportunity to give voice to things in our lineages that went unspoken and to bring them forth and to say, like, okay, actually, we can come back into alignment with our life force energy, with our vitality, with our connection to God, spirit, source. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
I 100% agree. And that's been a big part of my journey as well, as like I have been through a lot of really hard stuff in my life, most of it due to things that have been passed down through my family. But if I hadn't gone through that experience, I wouldn't be where I am now, going on this path, becoming a healer, doing all these things that are my life purpose. If I hadn't had all of those things to go through, I wouldn't be here. And so I look at that as a gift, even though it has been horrible at times to deal with it. But now that I'm kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I can see how this was my path. All of that was part of it.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I was literally journaling last night before bed. I was like, I am so grateful for everything that I've been through, all of the violence, all the distortion, all the abuse, all the numbness, all the amnesia, all the pain, all the suffering, all the illness, all the hospitalization, all of my medical history, all of my, heartbreak and grief and all the trauma, like everything actually was really useful. None of it was fun. Not a single part of it was enjoyable when I was like deep in the shit. I mean, it was I there are times when I'm like, I cannot believe that I'm still alive. Like that's crazy. And also I do think that it is such a reminder of the resiliency of the human spirit and the strength that we walk with, and also the clear knowing when I'm able to zoom out of my life and kind of look at it from a higher spiritual perspective. I just am like, thank God that I went through all of that, that I found the teachers, I found the modalities, I found the pathways and the timelines that were able to help me learn how to heal myself, that I did it. And now I just have deep compassion for my younger selves. I have deep compassion for people who are going through the same thing because I was in their shoes. And so in that way, I do feel that my whole, life curriculum essentially set me up to actually be able to be of service in the way that I chose to come to this life to do. And so I can only say that now, like you said, I can only say that now that I'm on the other side and I'm doing really well and life is pretty beautiful and I'm generally at peace and like pretty joyful 90% of the time, I would say. In the moment, fucking sucked. But as you said, on the other side, everything makes sense. And in that way, too, on the other side, everything in your lineage makes sense as well. Like you stop pathologizing family members. You stop pathologizing previous generations. You stop hating them. You stop blaming them. You get to a point where you're like, you make sense. You make sense. And this also goes into like any kind of family constellation work that people might be doing, because I've been deep in that as well for years. Being able to not only re-belong yourself to your bloodline, but to re-belong people who have been divorced as well, who have been pushed out, who have been shamed, who have been, like guilt passed on from them, embarrassment passed on from them, like to be able to bring everyone back into the family tree and say, we all belong. We all belong here. Um, and I feel like that then is such an important thing to be doing when you are in the process of saying, like, I do want to become a parent. I want to become a mother. I want to grow life inside of me. Like what you were speaking to, so much of your suffering was shit that was passed on that didn't get resolved. So let's dive into like preconception and that whole realm of like how women and men who are wanting to come into a parenthood portal and the journey of calling forth a new soul to place on one of the branches of the family tree, how does homeopathy serve all of that?
Sure. So, a big part of my learning before homeopathy was a huge amount about preconception health, fertility. I've always known I wanted to be a mom. And so, as soon as I found all this natural information about, like, oh, you should be doing this and, you know, cutting fragrances out and doing all these things. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But then again, the same thing, it still didn't seem like enough. It's like, okay, yeah, we take out the bad stuff, but how do we not feel like we're passing on, our traumas? Like, and so homeopathy is honestly like the perfect preconception health paradigm. Like so many women, like, now in the natural circles, people are starting to prep a little bit and, eating better and making sure they're getting in all of the stuff that they need to be and getting in shape and all these things. But if you're not preparing on the energetic level, then you're missing a plane of that. Like all of those things are great and important, and making sure your finances are in place and that your relationship is in a good place and all of those things. But there's also this whole other realm of the energetic that we're not touching on. And so preconception support with homeopathy can look like a lot of different things. It can look like just getting constitutional care for you as a person to make sure that you're in the best place that you can be when you want to step into motherhood or fatherhood. We also see a lot of fathers coming in, and that is amazing. Or like people who are preparing to be fathers. And so it can look like that. It can also look like just working on, like, if you have some like miasmatic like baggage per se, working with a homeopath to clear that kind of stuff in preparation. And then also we do a lot of work in homeopathy with fertility. So if you're already on the conception journey and you're struggling, like there's some block, especially, I mean, it's great for any kinds of fertility problems, but especially unexplained infertility, where they're like, we just have no idea why you can't have a child. And so a lot of times there's energetic blocks there. We see that big with the syphilitic miasm, and then also the big miasm of the 21st century, which is the cancer miasm. So, um, there's a lot of those are kind of the two main ones. We can also see the psychosis miasm with like if you have a lot of like genital urinary symptoms, like you have huge amounts of like period pain or you have fibroids, that kind of stuff can be dealt with the psychotic miasm. But we just see all of these blocks. And so my teacher, Mel Kopp, she's the one who started the school I'm in, and her whole practice before she started this was mostly fertility clients. And so she has a huge amount of experience in this and has seen people come in and get treatment from her that have done 9 rounds of IVF without success. And they do the miasm clearing and the homeopathic fertility supports. And all of a sudden, they're pregnant in 3 months after years and years of IVF and trying and all these things. And so we know that, yes, it's working a little bit on the physical pathology if people have, you know, like issues going on, like physically, it can absolutely support that. But even people who are like, I'm fine, my cycle's normal, everything is good with me, like my tests are normal, everything. There are energetic blocks that sometimes just need to be cleared, and it doesn't take all that much, and that can allow people to get pregnant really quickly. So, we see it really useful both for just preparing for pregnancy, which is like a big season that I've been in, not like in the next couple months, but just like I'm on a journey to become a mother. And I want to be the best that I can be, especially because I've struggled so much with my health. I want to be in a solid, good place, to bring children into the world. And I don't want them to have to suffer all the things that I did. And obviously, I know you can't protect your kids from everything. But you can do, some of this work for them.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking to all of that. And it is something that is so alive in the collective is one, I would say women pushing pregnancy back for a long time because that's what they've been told is better to do, to prioritize their career and like push it back. And you can always use reproductive technology to make it work. Um, and that's like one camp of women. And then there's another camp of women who are like, I'm ready, let's do this. I'm healthy, like I've been preparing for this. I feel good in my body, like why isn't it working? And they don't get any answers from the medical system because the medical system doesn't understand these profound, subtle, spiritual, ancestral levels of what these blocks are. And there's a lot of blocks that are alive in our modern day life, right? Like we live so out of alignment with the laws of nature just based on how sedentary we are in our lives, based on our food system and our waterways, based on the insane degree of chronic stress that we are under, based on just living under capitalism. Like there's like so many forces at play that really, really take, I would say women in particular, men in their own way, but really take women away from what our biological design of like my body knows how to create, knows how to gestate, knows how to birth, and knows how to nurture thriving life. My body knows how to do that. And you see just so much profound shame, so much profound grief, so much profound anger, so much profound guilt that women are moving through when they can't get pregnant because they're like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And I haven't been through that process myself, but I just have so much deep compassion and empathy for women who are in that position because it is the most horrifying experience to be like, I can't do the thing that I was put on earth to do. Seriously. what the fuck, like it's heart shattering to hear women speak on this, and so much of it, as you were saying, is like it's not even necessarily about what has happened to you, what you are doing, what you yourself as an individual are showing up with. Like there are blocks from many generations back. I recently went through a family constellation where I saw this mother in one part of my lineage who didn't know that sex led to pregnancy. And she was pregnant, and I was like embodying her in this constellation. And I felt her fear of, I didn't know and I don't want this. And so then you see that also distorting the family lineage, where you see women later in life who do really want it, but there's energetic blocks, there's stuff that's stuck, and you can't address that with IVF. That can't be addressed with IVF. That level of deep lineage clearing cannot be circumvented. And so, yeah, it makes sense that you have women who are coming in with like 9 rounds of IVF and things aren't working. And then the moment that you address the miasm, the moment that you're like, okay, let's get into like some deep quantum healing work right now, the field clears and it makes things, yeah, it just brings it back into natural alignment. It brings it back into alignment with the laws of nature that say, yes, I am more than capable of doing what I came to this earth to do. I got this. Do you want to talk a little bit about big topic, which is birth control, hormonal contraceptives, how all of that plays into this and how that can be addressed with homeopathy when women are in the transition phase and the healing phase and all of that?
Absolutely. Just back to one thing that you said with like the clearing the trauma, we can see it ancestrally, but it can also be even women who have had children and they had a really traumatic birth, and that has then put a block in place that they want to have more children, but their body and their spirit are scared, are traumatized by that. And so that's something that we can also clear if it's been things from your own life, or whether it's been sexual trauma that is, creating a block or things like that. So any kind of things that are, in your spirit blocking or physically, we can use homeopathy to soften those things.
Yeah, I would also say with that to abortions and miscarriage as well.
Yes, I forgot about that one. Yeah, there's several, like when we try to figure out a remedy, there's what's called rubrics, and there's several of like never been well since an abortion or a miscarriage, and that can create that same energetic block. Yeah. Um, okay, so moving on to birth control. So we also see this as a big block too, especially in our modern society when women are on birth control, not for a short period of time, but some women for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they come off and want to have a baby and their cycle doesn't become regular again, or it does, but then they're unable to get pregnant. And so we can see it's kind of the same, just a plug in the system, like an energetic block from that as well, whether it's sometimes it's as simple as like, quote, as simple as their hormones have been thrown off by birth control, and we can use, find remedies that fit all of their hormonal symptoms to bring things back into alignment. But sometimes it's just a block. We have a whole kind of concept in homeopathy, never been well since. So from a variety of things, it can be from like a flu or mono or something like that. It can be from taking a medication. It can be from pregnancy, any kind of event where it's like that happened. And ever since then, I've never been the same. And so there's many women who feel like they went on birth control, and ever since they came off or ever since they started, they've just never been the same. And so there's many remedies that we can pick that are whole, constitutional for the whole person that will support that. But then there's also we can make a remedy out of birth control. And so basically, it's just the energetic imprint that nudges your body into getting unstuck from, you know, whatever the birth control did to your energetic system. And so we can do that if women need that as well to kind of remove that block for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I just taught a class all about natural birth control, working with natural modalities of pregnancy prevention. And a huge part of a lot of it is like, yes, there is all of the physical healing that you can do. Yes, you want to be supporting your gut health, you want to be supporting your liver, you want to be supporting your kidneys. Yes, you want to be supporting like lymphatic drainage with movement and with dry brushing and all of that kind of stuff. There's so many things that we can call in, like from food, herbs, and supplements to support the transitional phase off of hormonal contraceptives. But then there is like the whole energetic, emotional, spiritual realm that also, I would say, takes center stage once you move through like the physical um, transition of it. I feel like the physical is like the first thing that you work on to like just get your body back into alignment. And then at that point, it's almost as if you're online enough to go into the deeper layers to what you're speaking to. There's so much that I could say about birth control, and I've been talking about birth control for like the past 2 months, and so we don't have to get super deep into it, but I do think that that is a block for a lot of modern women. They don't understand the degree of high impact that being on hormonal contraceptives had for so long. And so then when they're coming into wanting to get pregnant, they don't understand that there is so much clearing that often needs to happen in order for their body to be like, yes, I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's go. And as I said, a lot of different things that you can call in, but homeopathy, I do feel like is a big missing link for a lot of women as well. Okay, I would love to just kind of share a little bit about shifting health paradigms and what my experience was in working with you so that people can kind of get an understanding. So initially, when you offered to do a consultation with me in leading up to this episode, my biggest current health issue at that moment in time, my biggest like actual chronic health issue that I had been dealing with for 15 years was chronic acne. And I had had times where my skin was totally clear and no issues at all. And then I had times where it was like my entire face was just covered in red, huge pustules. Like I couldn't believe that my face was looking like this. I was put on hormonal birth control at 16 for it. I was on doxycycline. I was on spironolactone. I was on Accutane. I did every topical you could think of. I worked with all of the herbs. I did all of the holistic stuff, like everything. And I would go through phases of like my skin being clear and then it coming back full force, and then my skin being clear, and then acne everywhere. And it was horrendous. It's been like a horrendous 15 years of my life of not understanding what's going on. And so that, in terms of my overall health, was actually kind of my only issue. Like generally, I'm very healthy these days, and I feel good in my body. My cycle is regular. Like things are smooth. That was my one thing. And so we sat down and we did our consultation, and you went through for a whole 90 minutes, like my entire health history. You asked about everything that I could possibly think of in my family. You went through every moment of like what I would think of as like a traumatic event or a really impactful event in my life and tracking my symptoms through. And it was beautifully cathartic and painful and healing to just speak my story to someone in that way, to like give just a whole holistic view of everything this body and this spirit has been through. That in itself was deeply medicinal to have someone just hold space for all the different parts of like soul fracturing that I experienced throughout my life. And then in the storytelling too, I was able to start kind of weaving together, oh, this makes sense that this happened and this happened. Like these are all expressions of similar violations, a lot of which was boundary violations, a lot of which was sexual boundary violations. And then you were like, all right, I will get back to you in like, a week or two. I'm going to go through all of this. I'm going to go through all of my notes. I'm going to meet with my advisor, and then I'm going to, send you your remedies. And what you said, which was super helpful, was you were like, what's likely going to happen is that you're going to start getting symptoms of all of those health issues that you experienced throughout your life. And they'll start retroactively. They'll start with kind of like the first one that you ever experienced and go through the timeline like that. And they might be really intense, but they will clear and just like let your body go through it because it'll come up and then it'll go away. And you can trust that. And I was like, all right, yeah, I do trust that. I totally trust that. I can do that. And I think that's just where I'm at with my health paradigm now is I don't pathologize symptoms anymore. I really do see them as a signal that my body is finding homeostasis again. So I get my remedies. I start taking them. Very first day, horrendous stomach ache. Horrendous stomach ache. And that was my first health symptom. I had stomach aches my entire life. I was hospitalized for like a month when I was 13. I almost died because of really, really severe intestinal swelling that no doctors could figure out. And that was the first thing. The first afternoon that I started taking them, my God, that stomach ache, I was like, I am dying. And then it cleared and I was fine. And then maybe 2 days later, got a horrendous headache. That was like the next one of my symptoms that I had when I was younger. Horrendous headache that would not go away. And I just wrote it out. And I was like, all right, I believe that things are coming up to be healed. Things are coming up to be cleared. All good. Okay. Next thing that came was a lot of vaginal stuff. I dealt with so many vaginal infections throughout my life, probably for almost a decade. And so I was feeling like twinges of vulva itching, with like kind of yeast infection symptoms. And my like, how to say, like my both outer and inner labias were feeling like really just not good in general. And I knew, I was like, this is part of it. It's okay. And then I got little twinges of urinary tract infection symptoms, like pain while peeing. And I was like, it's okay. Like I just like kept writing it out. And you said probably the last thing that is going to be addressed and clear up is going to be your acne. So you just got to be patient with it. And I was like, I can be patient. I've been dealing with this for fucking 15 years. It's okay. And that was the case. It was like I went through every other thing first before I got to the acne. And then it was literally like I went through this insane 3 week long rage portal. You also told me like this is probably going to address some really intense, unresolved anger in your bloodline and in your lived experience. So expect a big blow up. And I was like, okay. And I thought that I was feeling the anger. I was like, oh, anger's coming up, but I'm resolving it. Oh, anger's coming up, but I'm better than it. Oh, anger's coming up, but I'm fine. And then anger took me down into a 3 week long rage portal that started on the first day of my period and finally resolved during ovulation. And right after that, insane rage moved through me in like the healthiest, most adult, most mature way. The next day, my skin started clearing up immediately, but like immediately. And I've been on these remedies now for, I guess, around 2 months. And when I was getting ready for this interview and putting on my makeup and doing my thing and looked in the mirror, I don't have any active acne, nothing. I have some scarring that I'm healing very gently, but nothing active. And so it was insane that that whole process happened right on the day that we get on the call to have this conversation. So that's a little bit of my side of things. That was like a very brief overview of what that whole process was, but it was incredible. It was really, really incredible to feel it. And it was subtle, but it was so deep in a way that I can only explain as like the most quantum healing process that I've been in outside of ayahuasca. Like ayahuasca was like the most intense, deep purging that I went through. This I felt was the most intense realignment that I've been through. So I would love to hear like kind of your side as a practitioner, like what dots did you connect and what things were you seeing, and why you chose the remedies that you offered to me and all of that good stuff, if you want to share.
Sure. So, um, when we take somebody's case and listen to their whole story, I'm looking for kind of what we call the red thread. So, like, what is the thing that weaves throughout your whole life and throughout all of the things that you're experiencing? One of my professors, he calls it the genius of the case. So, when we present to him, he's like, Okay, what's their main complaint? What is the genius of the case? What have you figured out is the reason why this is all happening? And sometimes it's as simple as it's just family history. Like they had so much heavy family weighted stuff that came through. That's often the case with small children. If they have a bunch of health issues, they haven't had time to rack up things in their own life that have caused them problems. Um, and so sometimes it's as simple as the miasmatic influence. And then other times it's like maybe there's a theme throughout life. Like we see so many griefs that they just couldn't get over. And so we go with a grief remedy. And for you, there was this huge theme of, and I know you've talked about this, so I'm comfortable talking about it, but um, this huge theme of sexual abuse throughout your whole life, but also your family's history. And so for you, it's both. It's happened to you in your own life, but it's also the energetics of that was kind of passed down. And so I wanted to clear the things that you went through yourself and then also the miasmatic influences for you. I'm not going to share about the specific remedies that I gave you because it's so individual to everybody else. And I never want to say, oh, I gave Claire this remedy for her acne. And then somebody else thinks, well, that's what I'm going to take for my acne, because that's just not how homeopathy works. There's not remedies for a specific symptom, it's remedies for a whole person. And so the remedies I pick for Claire are the remedies for Claire as a whole. And so if you have acne, it may not have anything to do with the remedies I gave for her. So, that's just kind of how it works. And a little bit about what we were talking about like shifting the paradigm a little bit is when all of these old symptoms are coming up. It's basically just like what has happened and why we end up in a state of disease is from suppression. So whether it's physical symptom suppression, emotional suppression, any of these things, that's why we end up where we're at because it's all just inside of us sitting in there. And so when you take the remedies to have this healing, it has to come to the surface so it can be released and let out. And whether that's the anger, whether it's a physical symptom that you had a long time ago that comes to the surface and leaves, there, it's usually not ever as like intense as when you were in it the first time. It's kind of like it's an echo of that, and you can feel into like that. You're like, okay, this is happening, and it's going to leave. Um, but those things have to come up and out. Like the whole premise of a lot of homeopathic principles is based on undoing suppression. So suppression can be treating something with a drug that basically they're not getting rid of the energetic roots and healing the reason why it was there in the first place. They're just suppressing the symptoms. And so many of us know that about modern pharmaceuticals, and that's why we don't do it anymore, is because it just suppresses, you stop taking it and then it comes back. And so that's just pushing it inwards, and we can see that that actually results in worse things, especially one of the um, best examples to illustrate is so many people have skin issues. And so they'll put a steroid cream on their skin and they're like, oh, good, the rash is gone. Well, the rash isn't gone. You've pressed it inwards. You've pressed the energetic distortion further into your body. And so the skin is the least vital organ. So it's the most safe place for your body to express things that it needs to get out. And so if you're like, no, it's not okay for you to express this on my skin, it the energetic distortion gets pushed steeper. So in practice, we see this a lot in kids who have eczema. They put steroid creams all over it and then they develop asthma within a couple years. It's that same energetic distortion, and it was pushed deeper into the vital force, into the system. And so we undo all of that suppression. That's another big part of why the birth control pill can be so detrimental, is it's basically just suppressing all of your hormonal function. And so we have to do the unsuppressing. And that's where some of these return of old symptoms and things come back.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I feel like I was able to align a lot with homeopathy and German new medicine after all of my time living in the jungle. Because when I was living in the jungle and drinking hundreds of cups of ayahuasca for a whole year and a half and just like purging from every orifice of my body for like months at a time. And I did get to a point in my study with the plants. I would say after probably about my first 3 months living in the jungle, I stopped purging in ceremony for the most part. Like I wasn't puking all of the time. My first 3 months, I'm not joking when I say every ceremony, I was on the jungle floor screaming, crying, just like getting all of this violence, this predominantly sexual violence out of my spirit, out of my cells. I was like shaking it off, like convulsing, shaking it off and getting it out. And going through that process, what I learned is when I get it out, I feel so much better. When I actually let myself go into those memories and see what happened to me, or see what happened to my ancestors, or see what my ancestors did, and see how this created soul fractures throughout our entire bloodline and throughout my own spirit. When I let myself actually go through it, I wake up the next morning and oh my God, I feel like a little piece of me has landed back in my body again. And so going through that whole process in the jungle of like, no, it's good to get this out. It is good to puke your guts out, puke all of that violence out because it doesn't belong to me. It's not my truth. It's not who I am at my core. It's not who my family is at their core. None of that is the truth of who we are. And so then being able to move into both German New Medicine and homeopathy with that framework, I feel like did prepare me for the understanding that the suppression of anything that is trying to get out is like just it's a complete halt of the healing. And at the end of the day, as you were speaking to, it will then show up in other health symptoms because the body is going to try to speak time and time and time and time and time again. And if you keep saying shut up, you're a problem. It's a problem that you're trying to communicate to me. It's an issue. It's like it's something that needs to be fixed and silenced because you are taking me away from my everyday life and you're making me do this. You're making me heal. Um, the body is just going to keep screaming. It doesn't care. It's like, no, you are meant to be in balance. I am trying to guide you there. You won't let me. So I'm going to scream louder and louder, more alarm bells, whatever I need to do to get you to pay attention, I will do. The body is so intelligent in that way. And so I think that going through this whole process with homeopathy, because you asked me, you were like, how intense do you want to go with this? And I was like, girl, I spent a year and a half going as intense as a person can. I think I'm down for a gentle reintroduction into this phase of my healing. And so you were able to give me a lower dosage of it, a lower concentration. And it was still intense, but not intense in the way that hundreds of cups of ayahuasca is. But it worked on the same level. I would say it worked on that same quantum level of healing. And so I will be curious. We're going to up my dosage. I am curious what's going to happen, but I feel prepared for it. And I feel just so trusting in my body's intelligence, so trusting in my body's wisdom, so quiet in my knowing that my body is more than capable of healing itself. It just needs those little nudges, as you refer to it, those little nudges of like, this is the way, that's the way. You already know. We're just reminding you. That's what it felt like, actually. It was like just a subtle, gentle, loving, tender, supportive reminder of what I already know in my spirit. Do you want to share anything on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I started by saying like homeopathic remedies aren't doing the work. Your body and your spirit is doing the work. And that's what makes this modality so powerful is because it's just bringing you back to you 100%. Um, and with the GNM stuff a little bit, I have a theory that when you have return of old symptoms, it's a conflict resolution because when you get a conflict resolution, then you get the symptom. And so like I have recently been on a new remedy about 2 weeks ago, and I took like 3 doses of it. And then I had like a 6 day long cold. And I went through all these different symptoms, and I had sore throat, and I had stuffy nose, and I had an earache, and I had this, and like all these things. And I'm like, ooh, I'm resolving something here. So I think there's definitely a link. And that's my theory on when you have a pop up of return of old symptoms that you're resolving some old conflict.
Totally. I mean, when I was in my 3 week long rage portal, what finally resolved it was I got really fucking sick. I got so sick and I was in bed, could not get out, pounding headache, body aches, shivers, fever, congestion, everything. And the only other times that I had gotten symptoms like that were when I was living in the jungle. I went through maybe like 3 or 4 different rounds of getting this intense like jungle fever that would only last me for maybe like 24 hours and then it would go. And when I was in the jungle, I knew like this is a good thing. It's good for me to go through this. Like my body is healing, it's resolving it. And so it didn't surprise me that that came through when I was in like the depths of bringing up all this rage around severe boundary violations in my whole healing with my remedies. And then once I got through that insane period of being bedridden for like 4 or 5 days, I came out of it and I was like, oh, I just literally burned away so much pain. Like my body knew that it had to get to this state of like insane heat to just burn that shit off. Like that's how it felt. It felt like I was like putting myself to the flames and being like, okay, I'm done with this. I let it go. So I agree. Just like the German New Medicine framework of like what it means to be in a conflict resolution phase and like a healing phase is actually what we would consider like I'm sick, versus like no, my body is healing perfectly and beautifully. Okay, amazing. This has been a really, really beautiful conversation. I feel it's good to wrap up here and move on to our extended episode where we're going to be talking about vaccines, drug detoxes, complex cases with children, kind of like, what do you do if you didn't have any of this information before you got pregnant and had children? What are things that you can heal on the other side of a motherhood portal and all of that? So I'm excited, but I would love for you to share how people can connect with you, get in touch with you, interact with your work, all that good stuff.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was great to be able to share. And I know that I feel like people don't know enough about homeopathy. And from what I know about your audience, I feel like it's the kind of thing that is like right up their alley. So I'm really excited to have you get to share it with all of them. So you can find me on Instagram at blooming_rebel. So it's kind of a combined account with my homeopathy, and then I also have a herbal infused soap and tallow skincare business. So I have soaps, tallow balms, that kind of thing. That's my other that's my other gig these days. So you can find me there and on bloomingrebel.com. So thank you so much.
Amazing, Stephanie. We will put all of that info in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with the listeners. Thank you so much for all of the incredible support that you've offered to me over the past few months. And I'm excited to continue the conversation over on Substack for Substack subscribers. So that will be over there. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm.